Now we're going to focus more on how to do it in real life, in practice. So, just tell me if you don't see my screen, then I will fix it somehow. But I will now walk you through how to create an application in real life. Cool. So, let's start with the tool that all of you guys hated or haven't seen. So, the blend. So, the blend is the tool that most of the developers will use when they're making the Windows Phone apps. And this is a very nice tool also if you want to create very quick prototypes. So I'm just going to create a new, you can see it pretty nicely. So I'm going to create a new phone app. Nothing serious, just a basic phone. Now it's taking a while to generate it. And this tool comes free whenever you download the SDK. So you don't need to worry about that. And I'm going to talk about the sample data, because not so many of you had used it. So right here we have something called data, and we can create either new sample data from scratch, from XML file, or from the classes. So depending if you're creating which part of the application development you're wanting to do this. So if you want to write at the start, see what it would look like, you are just creating new sample data. If you want to use the same data as someone else has already generated, then you're importing it from the XML. And if you want already, you have working application, would like to see how it would look like on here, then you're creating it from the classes. Because we have nothing ready, we are just creating new sample data. And it will ask you, what's the name of the sample data? And I will just name it as a test. And that's it. My sample data is done. Now we can create, basically, you can see from here, we have the test, and inside there is a collection. I just drag and drop it here. And yay, we have our first application done. I can start building it and use it on the phone. It works, it has the nice data and everything. So here you can see the emulator, and all of my nice buttons are already working and everything is fine. So let's go back. Maybe I want to a little bit like harder. So when you click here, you can choose to see what kind of sample data you have generated or it has automatically generated. So for example, here we have first list of strings and then we have list of booleans. Nothing really fancy, but for example, if I want to go here and change this to, let's say, my name, and then I click OK, you can see that automatically from the UI, I can see how it would look like. Maybe I have a little bit different data, so I'm going to delete this and create completely new, different kind of data. So I have data of names of people, and then I have emails of those people. And at here, I'm just going to choose that they are strings. And then it has different kinds of what kind of data you can generate. The lorem, larum, ipsum is the normal, what web developers use to generate just random strings of data. But there is also some other formats, like address. If you want to test what address would look like, it generates pretty real looking addresses. Then of course colors, company names, date, email address, name, phone number, price, time, and website URL. We are interested in the name this time. Oh, sorry. We're interested in email. And then I have the name, which I'm going to choose that this is the name. And now I'm going to drag and drop this the same thing. Whee! Nice bug. It's So let's try again. What? Okay. Because I used the same template and changed it, I'm going to do this again. So it's way easier to just create new project if you have problems on the XAML side, then fix it on here live. Sorry. So we are creating the new sample data again. And saying that we have the string, which under one is the name. Where is the name? Name. And the other one is the email, because we are interested in people's emails and names. String email. Okay. So now we have a list of people's emails and names. As you can see, creating a list is just dragging and dropping. But now, of course, without any padding, without any colors, without any hierarchy, that list looks horrible. You cannot make any sense of the data on that list. And if you think it is about the same as a web page, so whenever you're creating a list, you can always tell the web page that this list, all the items should be rendered this way. So on the Windows Phone, you have the same kind of templates. And you can just right-click here on the item and choose Edit Additional Templates, Edit Generated Templates, and Edit Current, which means that you're now editing what it would look like when it renders it. And now on the left, we can see that our whole thing is this box. And because I'm interested now to show whose email address you got, I will change the order of them so that we first show the name and then we show the email address. And then what I'm going to do is add a little bit padding between the elements. Let's say 24. So now you can already see that the data starts to make sense. Just by ordering them and putting a little bit space between the elements, the space is making much more sense already. And then if we bring the hierarchy to the same, so then if we bring the hierarchy into here by just increasing the font size, so increasing the font size to, let's say, 24. Just by doing little things like increasing the font size, putting them in the right order, the list is starting to make sense. And the whole idea is that I don't have any code done yet. I haven't written any single line of code, but I can already show this to the developer and he's like, oh yeah, I can support that on the data side. And you have all of the UI done. Even though this is a mock-up of what the UI would look like, this is already usable. From the design point of view and the design code on the XAML side, this is very usable XAML. You now just need to replace the data source with the real data source and not with the sample data, and it would have a really working application. So this is why the sample data is very powerful. The developer or the designer or the business guy can quickly create the mockups of the UI. He can then put it on the phone and go and show it around to the people and ask like, what do you think about this? Is this now better? Or do you think there should be some differences? Differences on the application. So generating the sample data is pretty nice. And now I'm going to a little bit change the sample data. So example of having two strings is pretty easy. Let's just add the normal element which you have, which is of course the picture picture of something. And of course, there is 4 different types. So you have strings, you have the booleans, then you have numbers, and then you have images. So right away from here, I can say that I have an image, and that's it. And now, if I go and see to edit the sample data, I can here just randomly pick different kind of pictures. I'm not going to show you what I have on pictures location, so I'm not going to demo that further. But after adding the different kind of pictures, you could then show the user what the real user experience would be like. Pretty cool? Yes. Okay. And the best thing is that if you're a developer, instead of getting the mockup with Photoshop or whatever tool, you can just like rip off all the XAML code. I can show it just to get you horrified. The whole XAML is done by data binding and everything, so it's very usable. You just take it at home and use it on your project, and it works. So that's how you easily get the developer and designer to create you really working mockups right from the start. And then, of course, if you want to do navigation, there is different kind of behaviors that you can add very easily just from this view. So even though you don't have any code behind, you can already build the whole navigation just from the visual designer tool. To do that, I first need to create, where is my project? So you need to create a new web page here, or like new phone page. So adding a new item here, and I would just add a new item, which I will just call about page. And you want to make it so that whenever a user clicks this box, it will go directly to the about page. Pretty simple. So you just drag and drop it, the whole navigate to page action. And your navigation is almost done. Then from the same UI, on the right side, you can choose what is the target page. I'm like, about page. About page, yeah. And now it's done. Now, if the user uses it, you can already navigate to the another page from the view. So, even though the designer doesn't do anything on the code, you don't have a single line of code, you can build up the whole navigation, the whole sample data from scratch. Of course, if you start to have harder type of data, for example, you're loading tweets from Twitter, you can maybe, the designer can first of all go and get the first 10 tweets and put all of those to the sample data and see how it looks like. But of course, if you want to see what it would look like with 1,000 tweets, you don't want to do that manually anymore. So after that point, it's then easier to hook up with the code, but the designer will get what it would look like. The one tweet, how it would form, how it wraps the text, what are the current font size, what are the colors, and then you just hook up and combine with the code. So it's pretty cool. Have you ever guys used this? Okay. So now, that was more about the plant that I'm going to show you. Then I have more on the Visual Studio side. So how many had used Visual Studio before? How many haven't used Visual Studio? Let's raise your hand. Okay, so 2 people. So Visual Studio is Microsoft developer tool. It's free. You get it from dev.windowsphone.com. And when you start it, it would look like something like this. And when you're creating new project, it will ask you questions. And the easiest way is to look some video to get used to the UI and the menus. There's like a huge amount of menus, but basically file, new project is where we are currently at. And like you can see from the left, we have a huge number of choices. Depending a little bit like which computer you are, that limits the choices or increases them. So we are just going to create new Windows Phone app. So how many of you are going to participate in the AppCamp hackathon? Okay. How many of you are going to build a standalone application without no web? No web calls, no API calls, nothing to do with web. Good. Most of the APIs, let's start it. How many of you know what API means? Excellent. So API is basically a service. Let's call this way. Facebook has an API. Using that API, you can easily get all of the data out from the Facebook. Twitter has an API. Basically, using that API, you can get all the data from the Facebook. Not Twitter, sorry. And on the APIs, you can make different kind of calls using different parameters. They have different kind of documentation. One of the things that most APIs these days have in common is that they are written in JSON. How many here doesn't know what JSON means? So, JavaScript object notification language. And using that, you can easily describe even very complex things. It looks horrible. I will show you an example of JSON. Come on. So what a JSON would look like. So this is a JSON file. Some could say that it looks horrible, some could say it's complex. But the beauty of the JSON is that it's very machine readable. How many here have done something with JSONs? Okay. I will now show you a pretty nice tool that if you're developing for Windows Phone or Windows 8, you can use this with the C# to read your JSON. So there is a website called JSON to C#. Basically what it does is that it takes the JSON file and it generates you a C# code. Okay. So you just put your JSON file inside, or you can put your URL inside. If you put URL, then it will go and fetch it. If it's behind password, of course it will fail. So in that case, please put it on some notepad or something and use it. So basically what it did, it analyzed the whole structure of what our JSON would look like. And this is basically an old API 1.0. Look what Twitter had. So it had pretty complex JSON annotation. And now basically, if you want to use this on a C#, you can just copy paste all of this into your project and start using them like it would be a C# class. This is very, very useful on those cases where you don't have existing SDK available for some reason. So, now how to use this? How many of you are familiar with NuGet? Good. So NuGet is the most beautiful tool in Visual Studio. The basic idea of NuGet is that you can download different kind of code libraries, third-party code libraries, straight from a web without going the whole trazzle of like first looking at which libraries, where do I get them, how do I download them, how do I unzip them, which one of these folders contains the right library, how do I then install it to my project, and that kind of things. So on Visual Studio, there is something called Manage NuGet Packages, which basically does everything for you. By default, it shows you all of the most popular NuGet packages. For example, lots of people are using jQuery, so it's showing you the jQuery. Lots of people are using JSON.NET, which is basically a JSON serializer for .NET languages. So that's why it's showing here very popular. And that's what we're now going to use. So I just click install, and that's it. Now I have the whole third-party library in my use. One of those examples would be that if you want to do image manipulation, you could search for Nokia Imaging SDK, and with just one click, you could install it. After that, you're ready to go through the samples. You're ready to start coding using that SDK. Or maybe you want maps in your application. And there is all the different kind of maps, whichever you want to use. So it's very powerful. How many of you didn't know NuGet before and does use Visual Studio normally? Good, because this is something that really helps you, especially when you're doing the hackathon, that whatever you're starting to do, start with NuGet. You want to do Twitter client, go to NuGet and search for Twitter. You want to do a Facebook client, go to NuGet and search for Facebook. Why are you doing that? You're doing that to check if there is something to help you to develop. It's not smart to make the wheel again and again and again. For example, I will now search the Facebook. And you can clearly see that there is a Facebook SDK available for C#. And there is also a Facebook channel, if you want to do channels on the Facebook. And there is also a lot of other stuff if you want to do Facebook authentication on your website, and that kind of things. Same with Twitter, there is lots of SDKs, different ones for Twitter. But now to the point that where we started, is that we generated the JSON file, we generated C# classes from that. What I now do is I copy paste all of this into my project, and I can start already using it. And the whole idea why you want to use this is that instead of remembering what kind of elements you have on the JSON, if you do this step, it will automatically, the Visual Studio knows which kind of elements are inside of which kind of elements. I will show you a quick example on how to do this. So when we start our application, we are starting it by downloading our data from the internet. So we start by downloading that JSON file. And once we are completed, we are going to do something with that code. And basically what we're going to do is get the file, which I have here. It's a very fancy URL address. And after we have got the data, we're just going to transfer that data into those objects. With using this, you can pretty easily, very quickly, start using different kind of APIs that you have never ever used before, which is pretty cool in case you want to build up something totally new. Okay? And after you have done all of this, then you can go through the lists as they would be your own. And that's one of the cool things on the JSON side. So how many of you have built Windows 8 apps together with Windows Phone apps? Okay. How many of you guys have thought about building Windows 8 apps? Okay, at least a few guys. So Windows 8 apps and Windows Phone apps are very nice to build together if you want to go that way, because they share most of the same code. The UI is built using the same language, and the code is built on the same language. Of course, you cannot just copy-paste your Windows Phone UI, your Windows 8, because of the screen size differentiation. It's like hugely different. You have so much more space. But you can share all of your logic. So if you have an application that has got lots of business logic, you can share all of that. So, then a little bit about how to combine your project that is on the Blend and then your project that's on the Visual Studio side. So, the easiest way is that when you start your project, you can either start it on Visual Studio or Windows Phone. I will now call this a blendable project. Is that you start on the Visual Studio side. You can start from any of those. You right-click your project, and you can choose something called Open in Blend from the menu. And then it will open the Blend with same project, and it will figure out that, okay, you're now using this from two places. Maybe you want to refresh the other when the other is refreshed. So this is very nice in those cases that there is a guy who's doing the UI side, and then there is a different guy who's doing the code side, and you want to combine them. But if you got two guys who are doing the changes on the UI side, then using this method, you will run into problems. How many of you are using source control, by the way, on this question? Good. If you want to have more than one developer, please use source control. I will show you quickly how to do it on Visual Studio a little bit later on. But now, if you change the color, and then you save the project, and you go back to the Visual Studio, it's telling you, okay, there has been a change on a Visual Studio. Do you want to reload everything? And now, if you have made changes to other file, please don't click yes to all. But because I haven't made any changes, I'm now going to click yes. Wow, now I have also red title. So they are perfectly in sync with each other. You just remember that whenever you're changing a tool, please save everything. And now to the little bit different kind of approach is that these days, whenever you're starting to create your application, you almost always want to get a backend. And your backend is basically doing most of the same stuff that it always does. And Microsoft has created a product called Windows Azure Mobile Services, which basically does all of the needed things that your normal basic simple API does. It helps you to store files, do authentication, push notification, logging, and then of course it's doing scaling and saving the files and having database. And one of the nice things on it is that I have just now created a blank new project on the Azure side. I can get ready-made samples for 5 different platforms. So if I'm going to create an application using HTML and JavaScript, I can do it right from here. And they have all of the needed necessary code right from here. If I want to do Android, they have the same for Android. If I want to do Windows Phone, they have the same for Windows Phone. So of course, I'm going to choose the Windows Phone. And everything you need to do is just save the zip file and put it on your machine and just extract it, everything. And it has ready-made Visual Studio solution that works right out of the box. When you're opening it for the first time, it's asking, do you want to trust this? Why? Because Visual Studio is running with admin rights, and you are opening now something from a website. It might contain something dangerous, but because you trust it, you just click yes. After that, it takes a while for it to open. And then you have ready-made Windows Phone application that talks to the backend. And why this is cool? Because this makes the help of getting started way, way faster. And it's pretty easy to start changing this. So I did no changes. I just started my project. What it first is doing, it's getting all of the third-party libraries, because they weren't on the package, but it's now downloading them onto my computer, and then it will start it. The sample is a basic to-do list. So it's only going to enable you to save different kind of to-do items into the to-do list, and then able to mark them done and refresh them between different devices. And currently, because we are on the Microsoft network, it's blocking my mobile phone network access. The sample doesn't have error handling, so now it's kind of crashing. Sorry for that. But this is very, very easy way to get started. Either if you're doing iOS, Android, Windows Phone, Windows 8, or HTML5. All of them work with the same backend. All of them have the exact same backend code. Of course, the front end is completely different between all those. And now, sorry. Sorry. Where is it? Okay. Seems like my Visual Studio is playing around with me. So then I'm not going to show you that. Okay. Great. And then, so how many of you know JavaScript? Okay. How many of you have written front end with JavaScript? How many of you have written back end with JavaScript? Okay. So one of the cool things in this backend is that you write the whole backend code using JavaScript. Why is that? Because most of the web developers, most of the front-end developers know JavaScript. Most of the iOS, Android, and Windows Phone guys also know the JavaScript pretty well. And JavaScript is used more and more on the backend side these days because it is pretty easy to write it and also to read it and change it. So everything on the backend side is done using JavaScript. So it's pretty easy to start using it. And all of the backend code is using Node.js. So all of the packages that you have on Node are also available on this backend. Anyone want to see a code? Okay, no, I'm not going to show it to you then. So, those are almost all of the Windows Phone when you're getting started and you want to get started very, very quickly. Those are most of the tips that I have to give to you. Now I hope all of you guys will go and start doing Windows Phone very, very quickly. Because the idea is on the Windows Phone, you can get started very quickly. The developer tools are great. There is lots of packages done. There is a design guideline, which if you follow, you can get started pretty quickly. And you don't need to think about the design that much. And after that, because you're a student or a startup, you get the published rights free. And you can put your application to the marketplace and then start to think about what to do next. Yeah, that's it for developer tools. I'm not going to bother you anymore with the code or showing you more code samples. I thank you, and I hope you had fun.